Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to D4. This is the show where each week we take a deep dive into one, sometimes two, specific character builds for Dungeons & Dragons. We crunch numbers about them, we theorycraft about them, not with the intent to tell you the right way or the best way to play a character in D&D, but to explore one potential way to build and play a character with the hopes of creating something that is both really fun, but also really powerful to play. So, if you enjoy creating characters for D&D almost as much as you enjoy playing the actual game, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on a character that you're thinking about building or playing, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm so glad that you are here. Truly, I am. My name's Colby. Thanks for being here. Really quick, if you would be interested in having like a written step-by-step guide to the build that I do today and all the other builds that I do on this channel so that you could recreate the character yourself if you wanted to without having to go back and rewatch the video or take notes, then I would appreciate it if you would consider joining the channel as a member. There should be a little button down there if you're watching on a desktop or a laptop anyway, that says join. And for $2 a month, you get access to the library that I create of all of the write-ups that I do for the character builds. And so that's kind of a little perk, but also it's just a nice way to support the channel and help me create more and better content. Huge thanks to all of my channel members. You guys are awesome. And huge thanks to everybody else too. Even if you're not thinking about or don't have any interest in joining, that's okay. I'm still glad you're here, and I'm grateful that you're here. And just watching and liking and commenting and subscribing are also great ways to support the channel, so thanks. Right, so ever since episode 5 on this channel, The Assasserer, I have been splitting up the builds that I do, which are focused on damage above all else, into two categories. Characters who are focused on sustained damage per round or DPR, and characters who are focused on burst damage or nova damage. Sustained damage is incredibly valuable in D&D. Having a way to just do high, consistent damage every single round without having to expend many or any resources to do so is just super effective and efficient. It's great for taking out every enemy on the battlefield as quickly and efficiently and reliably as possible. These characters tend to be, as many of you know, my favorite to build just because I really like things I can count on. But burst or nova damage builds also definitely have a place in a party, I think. And I've really become a much bigger fan of these types of builds over the last couple of years than I used to be. There's no question that having the ability to pile on a lot of extra damage in a single glorious round of combat, ideally early on in the fight with the use of some limited resources, can really go a long way towards eliminating an enemy or two early on in the combat, and thereby tip the scales of combat balance in your party's favor right at the beginning of the fight, making the likelihood of success for your party much higher than they otherwise would be. And also, of course, sometimes you just have a big bad boss that needs to die as quickly as possible before they TPK your party, right? These are areas where nova damage characters really shine. So I happen to believe that both of these types of characters are not only viable, but really valuable. And I think if I were creating an optimal party for D&D, I would try to make sure I had at least one of each character type, personally. That said, couldn't we try to do both? Would it be possible to create a character that could have really high sustained DPR and some nice potential burst options? Of course we could. And admittedly, several characters that I've built in the past probably did do decently at both. The Holy Warrior from just a few weeks ago comes to mind as probably a standout, or actually even the Ranged Fighter, like clear back in episode 2. That said, I've never really intentionally set out to build a character that excelled at both sustained DPR and burst or nova damage until now. So yeah, that's what we're going to try to build today. Now, as far as the character concept goes, for this character, the theme, the story, the feel of our hero, let me just lay it out for you at the beginning here. I want to build what I consider to be kind of a secret agent or a spy, but with a twist. Maybe more like the secret hand of a religious organization in this particular case. Akin, say, to like an Illuminati type character, or maybe Liliana from the Dragon Age games. for those of you who are familiar with them. That's a good archetype for what I'm going for here, I think. I have training in infiltration, espionage, subterfuge, stealth, but they're all meant to be used in the service of, in our case, like an organized religion or maybe a deity. Now, this religion itself need not necessarily be dastardly or nefarious, though it certainly could be, and that might be fun. But I think they definitely, if nothing else, would probably be wanting to put on like a good, clean face to most of the world, while employing servants like my character to handle the perceived necessary but less savory aspects of trying to make the world a better place, as they imagine it. This character is trained to get in, pack a big punch with the assistance of both my training and like technology and or magic I've been given to enhance my abilities, accomplish my mission, and get out before anybody knows I was there. And I'll also mention right here at the beginning that similar to the shaman build we did last week, I am going to run out of cards quick today, and others on this channel as well, of course. I don't think that with this character I would consider them so much as a character who is multi-classing into four different classes, but instead is like a custom class that we've created. We'd call it like the Secret Agent or the Hand of the Divine or the Inquisitor, who as part of their character progression just happens to take a few levels in a bunch of different classes along the way. I think it makes it a lot easier to roleplay this at the table personally, without feeling like you have to justify every different multi-class dip, right? But of course, if I were to go this way, I would want to talk it over with my DM right at the beginning in a session 0 and come up with like a really great backstory, as always, to set the stage for this cool and unique kind of custom class that we've developed here. That's just how I would approach it. My suggestion, feel free to take a different tack if you and or your DM want. But that's the end of the preamble. So I proudly present episode 99, holy cow, the Thunderball. James Bond? Anyone? Old school? Sean Connery? Yeah? Okay. As always, big thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton, who creates fantastic artwork for every single character concept that I send him each week. He's an incredible artist, and I love the vision of the character that he captures with his art each week. He's amazing. He is sometimes available for commission, so I will put, as always, links in the video description on how to follow him so that you can just check out the other stuff that he does, but also potentially reach out to him and see if you could commission him for some art for your own character or even your party. Thanks, Randall. You're awesome. Also, really quick, before we jump into the build, I wanted to tell you guys about a new sponsor for the video this week that I'm actually really excited about. Hit Point Press and Humblewood Tales, whose Kickstarter launches today, July 5th. Now, I've actually been a big fan of Hit Point Press ever since we started our Tales of Veneria actual play campaign a year ago, because my DM, Corey, makes a lot of use of the 5e compatible Griffin Saddlebag, which is also published by Hit Point Press. So when they reached out to me a few weeks ago to see if I'd be interested in plugging their Humblewood Tales Kickstarter, I jumped at the chance, because I know that they always do really awesome quality content. So Humblewood Tales is a companion book to the Humblewood campaign setting for 5th edition, featuring expanded lore around the mystical tree city of Alderheart. The book includes 5 new Humblewood adventures for character levels 3 through 8, where you will encounter private mercenaries, face off against a slime king, take on the amaranthine Kren in a nightmarish dreamscape, and so much more. Now, Humblewood Tales is going to be available as a book, but also a box set, and even a Kickstarter exclusive collector's edition. The book has over 200 pages of new content that is fully compatible with all your 5e games, including pre-made characters, a full bestiary, tons of new magic items, and a lot more. So whether you are familiar with Humblewood and have played in the setting before, or you're just looking to jump into the setting for the first time because it looks really fun and frankly adorable, which it is, you would be very well served by backing this Kickstarter. So please do yourself and them a favor and go to the URL here. It's d4.humblewoodtales.com, And I'd appreciate it if you'd use that link so that they know I sent you. I will, of course, put a link in the video description as always. I bet by the time you click on that link, they will have already reached their funding goal. Check it out, if for no other reason, to see if I'm right. In that case, go ahead and help them reach their stretch goals. I'm confident you won't regret it. Huge thanks to Hit Point Press. And let's jump into the build. All right, at level 1, as our starting class, we're actually going to start off this character as a fighter. There are so many reasons to take a couple levels at least of fighter on this character, but the main reason that I wanted to start fighter is for heavy armor proficiency, which we're going to want later. And if you multi-class into fighter after level 1, you don't actually get heavy armor proficiency. So here we are. As for our race, yes, there are 2 very important feats that we want for this build, and in my opinion, no feature from any race outweighs the ability to get a free feat to make our early game especially really, really strong, with maybe one exception that I'll mention in a sec. But so for this reason, we're going to go variant human. And I think variant human as opposed to custom lineage because there's no half feat that I'm planning on taking for this character. And I would rather start with a 16 in 2 ability scores, as I'll explain in a sec. So yeah, I think variant human's the way to go. The race I can see potentially outweighing the benefits of the free feat, mechanically anyway, would be the new and improved Bugbear from Mom, Monsters of the Multiverse, due primarily to the surprise attack feature that they get that lets them add an extra 2d6 of damage on attacks made against enemies who haven't taken their turn in combat yet. We made really great use of this feature in our Gloomstalker build a few months ago, and that's my last card for the day. It is a super powerful feature, no question, but I'm actually planning on using my first round of combat on this character to cast a spell, at least eventually. So we really wouldn't benefit too much from that surprise attack feature. If you have a reliable way to get advantage in your party otherwise without casting a spell, and you could just open up right on round 1 with weapon attacks, then sure, I would probably lean more towards going Bugbear here. But as for us, sticking with variant human, and for the free feat that we pick up, I'm gonna go with Crossbow Expert. Crossbow Expert, as many of you know, is an incredibly powerful feat. Gives us a number of great benefits. First, it lets us ignore the loading property of crossbows. Second, being within 5 feet of an enemy doesn't impose disadvantage on our ranged attack rolls, which will definitely come in handy when our enemies are all up in our business. And best of all, when you attack with a one-handed weapon, you can use a bonus action to attack with a hand crossbow. This would even mean that yes, if we wanted to, we could take the attack action, make an attack with a hand crossbow, and then, since a hand crossbow is a one-handed weapon, use our bonus action to make another attack with our hand crossbow. And yeah, since we can ignore the loading property of crossbows, we can do this. Thus, right away, we've got a fantastic weaponized bonus action and are making 2 attacks per turn. Being able to start with that at level 1 is amazing. As for our abilities, I assume point buy as always, and would recommend going a 15 dexterity and taking our +1 from variant human there, a 15 intelligence and taking our second +1 there, and then we want a 13 wisdom and a 12 constitution. I'm gonna say this now. I actually can see this character prioritizing either dexterity or intelligence. As you'll see later, I'm gonna actually prioritize dexterity, but intelligence would be a valid option as well, and I'll talk about that when the time comes to make a choice. For now, starting with both at 16 will both give us some time to decide, but also make it so that even the ability that we decide not to prioritize will still be pretty decent. As for our starting equipment, I would recommend the gold buy method and picking up some scale mail and a hand crossbow. We do have heavy armor proficiency, but we don't get any benefit currently from going chainmail versus scale mail plus our dexterity modifier, and we don't have the strength to wear heavy armor without suffering a move speed penalty, so I would just go scale mail for now. As a fighter 1, then, we get first up, and most importantly, a fighting style, and we're going to take archery, of course. Archery is the best fighting style in the game, numbers-wise, because against most enemy armor classes, having a bonus to your hit chance is just mechanically superior to doing additional damage when you hit, especially for those of us who pick up lots of ways to add extra damage to our attacks, like we are going to be trying to do. Archery fighting style simply gives us a +2 to hit with ranged weapons. And then we also, as a fighter 1, get second wind, which lets us, once per short rest, as a bonus action, recover 1d10 plus our fighter level in hit points. a nice little self-heal that's particularly potent at early levels. At level 2, though, our training as a secret agent began with the basics, weapon and armor proficiencies mostly, but having completed basic training, we are moving on to the more complex part of our training, which is focused around technology and magic, because we are going to take some levels in Artificer now. And yes, I know, for some of you, Artifice is very much not technology, and that's fine. For me, for this character, I think I would kind of see it as more like almost tech, or at the very least kind of tech mixed with magic. But as an Artificer at level 1, we get magical tinkering. First off, it lets you take a tiny non-magical object and turn it into a magical object that can do some nice utility things like shed light, play back a recorded message, emit an odor or a sound, or even display a static image. Then we also get spells, of course, some cantrips and first level Artificer spells. Lots of potentially great ones. I would definitely consider picking up Guidance for some nice utility and support, and Cure Wounds too. Having the option to heal in a pinch when you need it is something that every character could benefit from having. But the one that I'm going to focus on that's explicitly useful for our damage is Fairy Fire. And yes, this is like the reason that I didn't want to go Bugbear. Fairy Fire takes an action to cast, which is a bummer, but then it forces a dexterity saving throw from all creatures that are within the 20-foot area cube that you cast it in. If they fail their saving throw, all attacks against those creatures are made with advantage for the next minute, or until you lose concentration, of course. And they are also lit up and can't benefit from invisibility. It's a really strong debuff. And since getting advantage is so important for our numbers, I'm going to assume that we're using this spell or another concentration-based spell to give us advantage pretty much throughout our career. At level 3, we'd be an Artificer 2, and as such, we get Infuse Item. I love Artificer infusions with all of my heart. This lets us infuse 2 non-magical items and enhance them with a huge list of really great potential benefits. We can learn 4 infusions currently, but we can only have 2 items infused at any one time, and no item can hold more than 1 of our infusions. I think I would learn, but maybe not use, Enhanced Defense and Mind Sharpener right now. That would potentially, if we needed it, let us get a +1 to our AC, and with Mind Sharpener have the ability to maintain concentration much better. But the 2 that I would plan on actively using, at least by next level, would be both Repeating Shot and Enhanced Weapon. Repeating Shot would let us infuse our hand crossbow and give it a +1 to hit and damage, but also let you stop worrying about ammunition. With Repeating Shot, if you load no ammo into your infused crossbow here, then it just magically produces its own ammunition. This then would actually also mean that we could equip a shield now and continue making multiple one-handed crossbow attacks each round without having to worry about needing to take the Warcaster feat to cast spells with our hands full, since we're told that any item bearing one of our infusions can be used as a spellcasting focus, and we're told that you can use the same hand to perform somatic components of a spell as you use to hold your focus. So that's really nice, and we just get a free +2 to our armor class. Meaning that this character, without really trying very hard, is actually going to be pretty decently tanky. At level 4, we would be an Artificer 3, and we get first up the right tool for the job. This tells us that with an hour of work, you can create any set of artisan's tools. That might come in handy once in a while. But then we get our Artificer Specialist, our Artificer subclass, and we are going to choose the Armorer. Armorer is easily my favorite Artificer subclass. I just think it's so versatile in what it lets you do and really brings a lot of power. So, as an Armorer, first up, we get Arcane Armor, and this is a fantastic ability with lots of amazing benefits. We can now turn any suit of armor into our arcane armor. That first up lets us ignore any strength requirement that it may have, meaning we could equip like plate mail now, assuming we could afford it, and not suffer any move speed penalties. So depending on your available funds, I would switch to the best heavy armor we could get. In addition, the armor is considered a spellcasting focus for our artificer spells. It can't be removed against our will, but we can doff it or don it using just an action, which is super speedy. Now, we also get to choose our armor model. We get to choose between the Guardian model or the Infiltrator model. Guardian gives you a lot of nice defensive and tank-like benefits. I have used Guardian in a number of tank builds, and although we can switch between models during a short or long rest, we are going to be focusing, for this build anyway, on the benefits of the Infiltrator model. But I do love having the option to switch it up once in a while. Now, each model of armor has a unique special weapon. The Infiltrator model has what's called the lightning launcher. This tells us that a gem-like node appears either on our armored fist or our chest, akin to like Iron Man. This lightning launcher counts as a simple ranged weapon and has a normal range of 90 feet, that's pretty nice, and a long range of 300 feet, that's quite nice. We're told that if we make attacks with this weapon, we can use our intelligence instead of our dexterity if we want to. We don't have to. Currently, it doesn't really matter since we've got a 16 in both our intelligence and dexterity, right? But yeah, later on you will need to decide. The weapon does 1d6 lightning damage, and that's important. And once per turn, when you hit with it, you can do an extra 1d6 of lightning damage. It's sort of like a little sneak attack for artificers. Now, I need to mention something here. The crossbow expert feat says that we can make a bonus action attack with our hand crossbow if we make an attack with a one-handed weapon. So the question is, would making an attack with the lightning launcher fulfill this requirement? The answer, I think, is largely going to depend on your DM, as so many questions do. But in my opinion, in the strictest reading of the rules, probably not. I mean, maybe if you put the launcher on your fist instead of on your chest, you could consider that a one-handed weapon. I don't know. Definitely something to discuss with your DM. I kind of have a hard time believing that most DMs wouldn't allow it, but make sure to check. And also, even for those of you who have a real hardliner DM here, we will solve this problem regardless in a couple of levels, so don't worry. One last thing here. At this point, yes, I would probably infuse my lightning launcher with the enhanced weapon infusion, unless you've got the aforementioned hardliner DM, in which case you're still just making 2 hand crossbow attacks on your turn, and leave the repeating shot infusion on your hand crossbow. So we've got a +1 to hit and damage with both of these weapons. We're building for damage, amigos. Survivability be damned. Also, as an infiltrator, we get an additional 5 feet of move speed, which is always nice, and we get advantage on stealth checks. And that's really nice. This means that we could, if we wanted to, wear our plate mail armor, and even though that typically gives disadvantage on stealth checks, we have advantage now, so those two things cancel each other out, and we can just make our stealth checks as normal. I do assume that you would take proficiency in stealth on this character via like a background probably, and I would actually plan on playing that utility role of like scout, trap disarmer, lockpicker for my party. And so this is actually a really fantastic feature. And of course, if you found some mithril plate armor, you wouldn't have disadvantage at all. That would be awesome. Or maybe if being stealthy was more important to you than your armor class, you could just wear like a breastplate or something and not suffer that disadvantage. At level 5, we would be an Artificer 4 and we get our first ability score increase or feat. And yeah, of course, I'm going to take Sharpshooter. It's one of the best feats in game for increasing our damage, and that's what we're here for. So yes, going forward, we can attack from long range with our weapon and not suffer disadvantage. Considering our 300-foot long distance range with our lightning launcher, that's kind of amazing. Keep in mind, though, that your hand crossbow does only have a long distance range of 120 feet. I mean, that's still good and should let you make attacks against just about any enemy on just about every battlefield, with some rare exceptions, of course. Also, with Sharpshooter, our ranged weapon attacks now ignore both half and 3/4 cover. Super great if our enemies are trying to get behind cover to protect themselves. And then, of course, if we make a ranged weapon attack, we can choose to suffer a -5 penalty to hit and gain +10 to the damage if we do hit. And that is really quite amazing, especially when coupled with having advantage on our attacks and the archery fighting style. Those things really help to mitigate that -5 to hit penalty. At level 6, we would be an Artificer 5. First up, we get second level Artificer spells. There's lots of great options. I would probably make sure to grab Aid for the nice survivability bump that it gives to you and 2 of your friends, and Vortex Warp for the really nice utility of being able to move both a friend or a foe, if they fail their Constitution saving throw, up to 90 feet. But the one that I'll kind of focus on here and would consider switching our concentration to from Fairy Fire here is Web. As most of you know, Web is a really fantastic spell. You cast it in a 20-foot cube area just like Fairy Fire, and it fills that area with sticky webs. A creature who enters the area or starts their turn there has to make a dex save or they are restrained. Restrained creatures, as a reminder, have disadvantage on their own attacks and dexterity saving throws. They can't move, and attacks against them are made with advantage. So in a lot of ways, this is much better than Fairy Fire. The one way that I think it's inferior to Fairy Fire, actually, is that on their turn, a creature who is restrained by the web could potentially try and use their action to break out of the restraint. They would be making a strength check against your spell save DC, and if successful, wouldn't be restrained any longer. With Fairy Fire, on the other hand, if they fail that initial dex save, they are Fairy Fired and they remain so until your concentration ends. So yeah, Web definitely imposes a more powerful debuff and some control, but they do have a chance to break out of it later on. When I crunch numbers for the damage reports, I'm going to assume that we have advantage. Whether that's due to Fairy Fire or Web will be up to you, but just know your options and use the one that's best for whatever resources you have and whatever enemies you happen to be fighting at the time. Also, as an armorer at level 5, we do get extra attack. And while I was anxious to get to some other classes, it was really hard to ignore or delay the chance to increase the number of attacks we're making each round by 50%, going now from 2 attacks per turn to 3, thanks to Crossbow Expert, right? And yes, now, even for those of us who have real hardliner DMs, we should be fine to take the attack action, make one of our attacks with the lightning launcher, whether it's on your chest or your hand, and then make our second attack with our hand crossbow, since we're not required to make that second attack with the same weapon we used for the first one. And then, since we've now definitely made at least one attack with a one-handed weapon, we could use our bonus action to fire our hand crossbow again. So we should be golden. All right, at level 6, it's time for our first damage report. And you may notice something. We haven't really done anything to give ourselves some Nova damage yet. Just FYI, when I'm doing damage reports for this character and comparing them to other builds that I've done, I am going to consider them to be a Nova or burst damage character and compare them accordingly. I will report on what the sustained DPR numbers are too, but when they show up in the graphs and the spreadsheets, check the video description, that's where you will see them, primarily because we're going to be taking some features that I consider to be burst or Nova damage features, so it made the most sense to me to compare them there. My original plan when I first started building this character was to take character levels in a different order in order to get some burst or Nova damage, but sort of ironically, doing so actually would have left us with even less damage even during our Nova round, as this version of the character gets just as sustained damage every single round. So I decided instead to kind of build up that foundation of sustained DPR and then look from this point forward for ways to create some nice burst damage potential. But as is, for now, I am assuming that on round 1, we're casting Web or Fairy Fire. And no, I do not feel bad about wasting my first round of combat in any way, shape, or form, since both spells are really quite potent and are going to give you and your entire team a very increased chance of success against your enemies. But then, on subsequent rounds, simply making 3 attacks against an enemy with advantage. 1, at least, with your lightning launcher, that will do an extra d6 of damage once per turn, and then 2 with the hand crossbow. Since these are all ranged weapon attacks, I'm assuming that we're applying that sharpshooter -5 to hit, +10 to damage. And don't forget, all of our attacks are made with a +1 to hit and damage thanks to our infusions. And thus, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 54 damage per round. And against an enemy with a 15 armor class, it would be 44 DPR. And compared to other sustained DPR builds at this level, that's very near the top of tier 1. And thanks to having advantage plus our archery fighting style, we wouldn't even turn off the sharpshooter feat until an enemy AC of 22 or higher. That's really good. Now, that amount of damage compared to other burst damage builds is like bottom half of tier 2. But again, I don't feel bad about that in the slightest because we get to do this damage every single round, at least after round 1. But yes, as I've said, going forward, we will try to find ways to add some potential Nova damage for this character. Starting right away here at level 7, because we're going to be a fighter 2, and that means we get Action Surge, which lets us, once per short rest, take an extra action on our turn that can be used to do anything an action can do, including, as I'm going to assume, taking the attack action again for 2 additional attacks. Now, you could, of course, cast Fairy Fire or Web with your Action Surge, and then make 3 attacks all in round 1, and that's nice. I would not criticize you for doing that. When I crunch numbers, I'm going to assume that we're getting all 5 attacks that Action Surge would now let us make in a single round. But at level 8, now that we have Action Surge, it's time to, I think, take some levels in our 3rd class. Thus far, our Spy, Secret Agent, Hand of the Divine has been sorely lacking in the divine part of their training. No longer. Now that we have received adequate training in both our martial and technology/magic skills, our handlers are going to take us under their wing to deepen our education as to the why of our calling, and instill in us an even greater zeal to fight for the church/religion/deity that we have been called to serve. Whatever your reasons, we are taking cleric levels now. So, as a cleric, at level 1, we get our cleric subclass right away, our divine domain. And we are going to be taking the Tempest domain, finally putting the thunder in our Thunderball. I like to think that this means that we are in the service of a Zeus-like god, since that feels to me anyway, I don't know, like a higher calling as opposed to serving, say, just a god of storms or thunder. But I would definitely work this into my backstory and with my DM, and would absolutely have been playing up this aspect of my character from the very beginning. You can be religious in D&D without being a cleric or paladin, right? Just like, you could be a cleric or paladin without being religious if you really wanted to. But as a Tempest cleric, we get a nice little feature right at level 1 called Wrath of the Storm. This tells us that wisdom modifier times per day, that doesn't really roll off the tongue, does it? If we're hit by an attack from a creature within 5 feet of us, we can use our reaction to force that creature to make a dexterity saving throw or take 2d8 lightning or thunder damage, half on a save. It's a nice, mini hellish rebuke that doesn't cost a spell slot. We also get first level cleric spells and cantrips, and although I wouldn't plan on using any of them to bolster our Nova damage, I will quickly mention that I would for sure pick up Healing Word, since it's a more efficient and effective way to heal compared to Cure Wounds, since we can cast it as a bonus action from range and then still get the majority of your damage on that turn. We're definitely not building a support character here, but being able to throw out an occasional heal and debuff, again, are really fantastic things to bring along for any character. Speaking of that, the other spell I think I'd be sure to pick up here is Bless. It requires our concentration, so obviously no Fairy Fire or Web if we were using it. And while numerically speaking at least, having advantage from either of those spells would be superior to the plus D4 on your attacks that Bless would give you, Bless does have some really nice advantages by comparison. First and foremost, it just works all of the time. No saving throw required. No need to worry about accidentally getting allies in the area of the web or the Fairy Fire, right? No need to worry about enemies making their saving throw against it. And second, you do get to bless yourself and 2 other allies. Or 3 allies, of course, but why would we do that? Third, it also gives you a plus D4 to your saving throws. So yeah, a slew of great benefits. Sure, when I crunch numbers, I am going to still assume that you have advantage, because I always assume best case scenarios. But in actual game, in practice, I imagine that I would be using Bless a fair amount on this character. Depending on the battlefield, depending on what enemies I was fighting, what my other party members were doing and where they were standing, etc., etc. At level 9, we'd be a cleric too. And as such, we get Channel Divinity. All clerics get Channel Divinity, and they can use it once per short rest to either turn undead, which forces undead creatures within 30 feet of us to succeed on a wisdom saving throw or be turned. And that means they have to spend their turn for the next minute trying to move as far away from us as possible. But then every cleric gets a second option to use their Channel Divinity on, and for Tempest clerics, that means we get Destructive Wrath. And it's the main reason that we wanted to take cleric levels. With Destructive Wrath, when you deal lightning or thunder damage, you can use your Channel Divinity to deal maximum damage instead of rolling, and that is neat. And it will get even neater as this character progresses. So, for our level 9 damage report then, we've actually added a couple of features here that will let us do some extra burst damage once per short rest. First off, of course, Action Surge for a couple of extra attacks during our Nova round, and then Destructive Wrath, which will let us take the 2d6 of lightning damage that we get to do with our lightning launcher once per turn, right? And just do a straight 12 damage instead of rolling those d6. That's not a huge difference, only, 5 more damage on average when we use our Channel Divinity, but we are going to focus on a nice way to make it better. Keep in mind, too, that if we crit on that lightning launcher attack, instead of rolling 4d6, right, we would just do 24 flat damage, plus our sharpshooter, plus 1 from our infusion, plus our dexterity or intelligence modifier. That's really cool, though I don't think I would advise just waiting to use Channel Divinity until you get a crit. I mean, sure, with advantage you have almost a 10% chance to do so, and if you're making 3 or even 4 attacks with your lightning launcher in a single turn, when you Action Surge, the chance that one of them will crit gets much, much better, but still, it's less than 50% chance and there's no guarantee. So I'm probably just going to use Destructive Wrath the first time I hit with lightning launcher, personally. But assuming all of the above, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would on average here do 94 damage, and against an enemy with a 16 armor class, it would be 76 damage. And that is almost double the damage since last time we checked, only during our Nova round, of course. And we almost broke the Centennial Barrier, at least at low ACs. Most of that extra damage is coming, of course, from Action Surge currently. And when we compare ourselves to other Nova builds at this level, we're about middle of the pack for Tier 2. So we've made some slight gains on that group, and our sustained damage is 55 and 44, respectively, at those ACs. And that's also about mid-tier 2 compared to other sustained DPR builds. So I'm feeling really good right now about how we're stacking up, considering that we're kind of trying to do both, right? Let's see where we can go from here. All right, at level 10, with our martial, tech and magic, and now spiritual training complete, it's time to focus on the secret aspect of our secret agent. At this point, and from here on out, actually, our focus is going to be on perfecting the skills of subterfuge, espionage, stealth, and subtlety. For you see, from now on, we are taking nothing but rogue levels. And mechanically, at least, for the purpose of Nova damage, the main reason we're doing so is for sneak attack. So, as a reminder, sneak attack lets you do a little extra damage once per turn. For now, it's an extra 1d6. So long as you either have advantage on your attack or your target is standing within 5 feet of one of your allies, and you're making that attack with a finesse or a ranged weapon. We should be able to qualify for those things pretty much all of the time. But here is the really awesome thing about sneak attack. The additional damage that it does is, quite simply, the same damage type as the weapon used to make the attack. If you need confirmation, here's a tweet from Jeremy Crawford confirming that. And thus, if we apply sneak attack damage when we hit with our lightning launcher, the additional sneak attack damage is also considered to be lightning damage. And thus, if we use our Destructive Wrath Channel Divinity to do max lightning damage on that same attack, then the sneak attack dice will also do max damage. Thunderball indeed. For that reason, numerically speaking anyway, I think the best way to pump up our Nova damage going forward is just to scale that sneak attack bonus damage as much as we possibly can before our campaign ends. And honestly, my biggest regret with this character was having to wait until level 10 to start doing that. But delaying extra attack and action surge just didn't add up mathematically in order to try and get Destructive Wrath and some sneak attack damage. So here we are. But we're really happy to be here now. So as a Rogue One, we also get expertise here, meaning you can double your proficiency bonus in 2 skills that you're proficient in, or 1 skill and your proficiency with Thieves' Tools. I think, again, I would probably go Thieves' Tools and Stealth on this character, personally. But, maybe you're playing up the suave aspect of your James Bond prototype and would prefer to go Persuasion and Deception. Do what you will. Also, we get Thieves' Cant here, which lets us read and write in that special coded language that only thieves know. At level 11, we'd be a Rogue 2, and we get Cunning Action. This lets us use our bonus action to hide, disengage, or dash. Usually those things require an action. That's definitely going to come in handy once in a while. And then at level 12, we would be a Rogue 3. Our sneak attack bumps up to a 2d6 now, that's great. And we get to choose our roguish archetype, our rogue subclass. And honestly, this was a bit of a difficult choice for me, as picking a roguish archetype so often is. I can actually see strong arguments for a number of different options here, so I will mention each of them briefly. Assassin makes a lot of sense thematically, and the really nice thing about Assassin is that if you have surprise, all of your hits are automatically critical hits. That's huge and would do amazing things for our Nova damage, but with one exception, and that exception was the Assassiner, that first Nova damage build that I ever did. I've never assumed on any build that we were going to have surprise when I crunched numbers, because in my experience, it's a pretty difficult thing to come by, or at least rely on in a campaign. Maybe my DM is meaner than most DMs in this aspect, or my fellow players are just less willing to patiently wait for me to try and get surprise before every combat. But yeah, so very often in D&D, combat just happens, whether you're ready for it or not, right? And I just don't like crunching numbers, assuming that you're going to have surprise on every Nova round. Even though I do claim to always use best case scenario numbers. I guess that's one assumption that I'm just generally not willing to make. But yeah, if you wanted to go Assassin and felt pretty confident that you could get surprise semi-regularly, go for it. I also like Phantom here as a subclass option for the ability to do a little extra sneak attack damage to a second enemy a few times per day. I like Soul Knife for the strong increase to our utility more than anything, but I think if it were me playing this character, I'd probably go Arcane Trickster. We already have a little bit of decent spellcasting ability, and enhancing it even further with Arcane Trickster just felt like the right move for me. Currently, thanks to multiclassing, we have spell slots as though we were a 5th level full caster, right? 5 levels of Artificer that we take half of, but rounded up, plus 2 levels of Cleric. Taking Arcane Trickster here means spell slots of a 6th level caster, and of course that's going to increase, eventually getting us 4th level spell slots. Even though we only have like 2nd level Artificer spells and 1st level Cleric spells, being able to upcast some things and just having more spell slots in general is just really nice. Also, getting access to the Wizard spell list here, thanks to Arcane Trickster, just really lets us add a lot of additional spells to our bag of tricks. That's the route I'm going. And so yeah, as an Arcane Trickster, like I said, we get Wizard spells here. We get 3 Wizard cantrips, first of all, Mage Hand and 2 others, and 3 1st level Wizard spells, but 2 of them have to be from either the enchantment or illusion schools of magic. For my 3rd spell that I get to pick here that can be from any school, I think I'm probably taking the shield spell to bolster our defenses in a pinch, but I can definitely see an argument for taking, say, Find Familiar, both for utility and to grant advantage on an attack, especially if we're not relying on Fairy Fire or Web, or the enemies made their saves against them, right? For the other 2 spells, though, I definitely take Silvery Barbs as one. That forces an enemy to reroll a successful attack or save, and is an enchantment spell. And as for the second one, I say pick your favorite. Disguise Self definitely has appeal, especially thematically, if nothing else, or maybe Minor Illusion or Hideous Laughter for a control option. But we also, as an Arcane Trickster, get Mage Hand Legerdemain, and this basically just really buffs our Mage Hand cantrip. It lets us make Mage Hand invisible if we want. It lets us use it to stow or retrieve an object. and even, most potently I think, use Thieves' Tools to pick locks or disarm traps from range, thus helping us stay safe against potential traps gone awry. We can do all of those things with our bonus action, too. That is a nice bit of utility. At level 13, we would be a Rogue 4, and we get another ability score increase or feat. And it's not until this point, actually, that we really need to decide if we want to prioritize our dexterity or our intelligence. I can't believe it's taken this long, and I hope that you've maybe somehow managed to secure a headband of intellect along the way. I haven't felt too bad about the delay, though, because archery fighting style has given us a bit of a buffer to make it so that the delay to increasing our primary ability score hasn't hurt too bad. But at this level, yes, I am going to bump dexterity, raising it to an 18 for 2 reasons. One, I want our hand crossbow attacks to have as good a chance to hit as our lightning launcher, and while attacks with the lightning launcher could use intelligence, attacks with the hand crossbow could not. But attacks with the lightning launcher could use dexterity if we wanted. But also, too, I really do envision this character, like I've said, as like a stealthy, lockpicky scout, among other things. And so I really want to enhance all of our skills that come from a high dexterity. Not to mention better initiative rolls, better dexterity saving throws, etc. All of that said, if you wanted to bump intelligence here, I wouldn't blame you in the slightest. Among other things, it would mean a higher likelihood that our Fairy Fire and Web spells stick, pun intended, and yeah, would generally enhance most of our other Artificer and Wizard spells too, right? So feel free to go that route if you really want. All right, for our level 13 damage report, we've increased our dex, giving us better hit chance and damage. But the biggest change that we've had to our Nova round especially is coming from sneak attack. So yes, now, the first time that we hit with our lightning launcher on our Nova round, I would add d6 of lightning damage that we get to do once per turn, inherent with the lightning launcher, as well as the 2d6 from sneak attack, and then use Channel Divinity to turn that 4d6 into 24 flat damage. And of course, 48 if we crit. Oof, one more reason to consider going Assassin here. Plus, of course, our dex bonus, our +1 from our weapon, and +10 from Sharpshooter. That means that that single attack would do 39 damage all by itself. Not too shabby, considering that we've got 4 more Sharpshooter-infused attacks coming if we action surge. And thus, against an enemy with a 10 AC, we would do 115 damage during our Nova round on average. And against an enemy with a 17 armor class, it would be 97 damage. And alright, that's nice, but truth be told, compared to other Nova damage builds at this level, that's actually very near the bottom of tier 2. But again, the thing that's really important to remember on this character is how good our sustained damage is as well. It's really solid. It's currently a 67 and a 57 at those respective ACs. And that is also near the bottom of tier 2 for sustained DPR characters, but remember, there are currently, anyway, 3 tiers of sustained DPR. So I'm willing to bet that most, if not all, of the burst damage characters that I've built to date don't have a sustained DPR that's that high. But no, before any of you ask, I'm not going to go through all of my old Nova damage builds and crunch numbers for sustained DPR on them. Sorry. Don't have that kind of time. Anyway, I feel really, really great about where our damage is at. All right. At level 14, we would be a Rogue 5, and our sneak attack damage goes up to 3d6, and we get Uncanny Dodge, which is another nice little tool in our defensive tool belt, letting us use our reaction to halve the damage of a single attack against us. This would be particularly nice in those instances when the shield spell just isn't going to help us because the enemy rolled so high to hit, or maybe most importantly, if they get a crit on us. That said, do keep in mind that if we have the shield spell and a spell slot to cast it, using our reaction for that does raise our AC by 5 until our next turn, while Uncanny Dodge only works against 1 attack. So, depending on how many enemies there are and how many attacks we anticipate potentially taking between now and our next turn, shield still might be the better alternative. At level 15, we would be a Rogue 6, and we get a second round of expertise. So now maybe we're taking Perception and Sleight of Hand, if you haven't yet, but again, pick your favorites here. At level 16, we would be a Rogue 7, and this means our sneak attack goes up to 4d6. And we get evasion. We're really adding a lot of nice defensive and utility options in addition to the damage that we keep getting, right? With evasion, if we have to make a dexterity save to take half damage against something like a fireball, then we take half damage if we fail the save and no damage if we make it. Hooray for survivability. We also would now get second level wizard spells, and I can see a case being made for several enchantment or illusion options, which is all that we get to choose currently. Blur, invisibility, mirror image, suggestion, hold person, all worth considering, among others. I'm just going to say PYF. And then finally for us at level 17, we would be a rogue 8, and we do get to choose a second spell that doesn't have to be from enchantment or illusion. Thought I'd mention that really quick just to say that I'm probably taking Misty Step here for the really nice and always useful ability to teleport as a bonus action. And then we do get another ability score increase or feat. And yes, of course, I'm going to bump dexterity, raising it to the cap here of 20 for us. Can't believe it took me that long. Sheesh. But feels good to finally be there. And yeah, for our final damage report then at level 17, we've now capped our dexterity and gained 2d6 additional sneak attack damage. That again will become max damage when we couple it with our lightning launcher weapon and destructive wrath. But in addition to all of that, don't discount the fantastic utility and defensive features that we've picked up here as well. So, against an enemy with a 10 armor class here during our Nova round, we would do 131 damage on average, and against an enemy with an 18 armor class, it would be 116 damage. And sure, while that is still near the bottom of tier 2 compared to other Nova damage builds at this level, the sustained DPR continues to be really solid, coming in at 78 and 69 for those respective armor classes, which is now near the top of tier 3 compared to other sustained damage builds at this level. And so, final thoughts. Alright, when looking at Nova damage and averaging the damage that we do at all the enemy armor classes we account for at each of the damage reports, averaged all together, our tier score ends up being 80. And yes, that is very near the bottom of tier 2. The only character doing less burst damage than this was the Whippoorwill, which I can't link to because I'm out of cards, but that was a good build, and though their burst damage was not great, they could do it several times per long rest, so that was a little bit hybrid-y. Anyway, looking at that, it kind of strikes me now that this character definitely does look better by comparison when they're matched up against other sustained DPR builds. For sustained DPR, their tier score would actually be a 51, which puts them very, very near the top of tier 3. But kind of like I said earlier, the reason why I felt like I needed to make the primary comparison here against other burst damage builds was because one of my main motivations, in fact, my initial motivation for building this character was to try to find a fun way to take advantage of Destructive Wrath plus the Infiltrator's lightning-based attack. And, of course, with Destructive Wrath being a once per short rest ability, if I were going to use it, I had to consider them a burst damage character, right? So, in the end, this was actually a really fun experiment. If nothing else, it taught me how difficult it can be to try to build a character that really excels at both burst or Nova damage and sustained DPR. And you know what? That's okay. I actually feel like I would have been quite dismayed if I could have built this character to be like tier 1 both for burst and sustained damage, because at that point it would be really hard to play any other character. For me, anyway. But the one that we ended up with was actually not only, I think, really fun and cool, but super powerful and incredibly well-rounded. I mean, really solid sustained DPR, good on-demand burst potential, a whole host of utility features via spells and roguish skills, fantastic defense thanks to heavy armor, shield use, evasion, as well as potentially other defensive spells, and then even a smattering of support features like a solid concentration-based either debuff or buff, and a couple of heal options too. All told, this character is not only probably the Nova damage character with the highest sustained DPR I've ever built, but might be the most well-rounded character I've ever made to date. Period. I can think of a couple exceptions, but definitely like top 3. And that, I think, in and of itself would make them both really powerful and a heck of a lot of fun to play. What about lightning immune enemies, huh? What about those guys? Yeah, I don't know. Character has a weakness. Hopefully your DM doesn't just fill your campaign with lightning immune enemies, because if they do, they're kind of a crappy DM. And actually, hand crossbows don't do lightning damage, so it's not like we have no options. That's the build for the week. You know what? I love you guys a lot. So thank you for watching, for being here, for liking and subscribing and commenting and all of the things that you do to support me. I'm super grateful for you. I truly am. I hope that you will check out the other content in the channel if you're not typically in the habit of doing so. But more importantly than that, I hope you have a fantastic day and a really great week, and that you stay safe and be good and kind, and that I see you again very, very soon. All right. Until then, take care. Bye. Thunder. I was born in the middle of the night. Ooh, check out this awesome Father's Day present. I am their father. Kids' names, favorite color, lightsaber. I thought it was pretty awesome. You've been thunderstruck. Squeaky McSqueakerton. Let's just jump right in. That's not true. That comes next level. Whee! That was gross. We get to choose our subclass. Our divine... Apparently it's smoothie making time. And we get to take half of those but round it up. Plus... shoot. Well, don't say that. Is that on their turn? Oh. My friend Tori just sent me a message. I think I better reply really quick. If they fail that initial dex save, this tells us that wisdom modifier... I better look something up here. Creatures have disadvantage on perception checks that rely on sight. Oh, okay. Oh, that's not so bad. No worries in that case. No worries in that case. Don't worry. Be happy. Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo.